What's up, everybody? Welcome back. In today's video, we're going to be discussing support and resistance. This is a topic that most traders are familiar with, but I think what we're going to discuss today is really going to shed some light on the truth behind support and resistance. When we were discussing this concept and making a video about it, Linzi and I were like, we should call it why support and resistance doesn't work. But like I said before, Linzi, it's not that support and resistance doesn't work. It's just that it isn't enough to give you the edge in the market that you need for consistency. So we're going to discuss this idea today because I think a lot of traders get caught up in it. And I think you bring really good experience in this because before ASFX, like you've spoken about before in other videos, you talked about how support and resistance was something that the group you were with was really focused on, even to the point where that previous video we did about risk reward a couple of days ago, we talked about how like the way that they were showing you the support and resistance levels, it was screwing up your risk reward in a lot of situations where you'd have bigger stop loss than potential take profit because of that support and resistance. So going back to where you like got started in trading, if you think back to when you first got into this, very quickly, did you figure out what support and resistance was because like everybody was talking about it?
Yeah, because that's how I was initially taught, was really just naked charts and drawing support and resistance. Using
no indicators, nothing, just price action,
no
just candles.
No price action, support and resistance, that was it.
And when you were going about this, were you drawing the support and resistance levels? Like, tell me, was it lines on the bodies? Was it lines on,
it was lines
zones?
No, it was lines on the bodies, and we drew them from the daily. So we would go and look, for the highs or the lows on the daily, bring it down. And so that would have a black line. And then coming down to the 4 hour, we'd do the same. That would be an orange line.
Different colors for different time frames.
Blue for the 1 hour and pink for the 15-minute. Whatever colors you wanted to put on your charts was how it did it. And I kind of like made my lines a wee bit thicker for the hour and the 4 hour because I was kind of zoned in on these zones more than the kind of 15-minute.
Sure. So now coming forward to the way that you trade today over the last year and a half, it's changed a lot from that. But support and resistance still plays a big part in what you do. In fact, one of the things that I think about is like how you had a period of time where you were trading specific trades off of a daily pivot support or resistance level, and you were looking to trade off that level. So support and resistance, like I said, it's still important. But where did you figure out that there was more to your edge than just support and resistance? Can you remember anything that clicked with that?
Because I was really struggling to try and find that consistency only using support and resistance. That was obviously when I went on to do my research online to try and find what could I bring in to try and find my edge before coming into ASFX. And when I obviously started to follow you, I knew that you were using EMAs, and that was something that I was taught in my previous community, but it wasn't something that my mentor really wanted us to use. She wanted us just to use price action and support and resistance, and that was it. She thought that was a better way of trading. But for me, I really aligned to using the EMAs. So that was kind of first thing that attracted me to ASFX was, okay, but you are using 5 EMAs, where I was really only taught just to use 1.
Right.
So I kind of got my head thinking, right, okay, how can I cooperate this in with what I've already been taught? So I thought I could use the EMA and try and bring that in to help me trading off the support and resistance. But it helped me in my direction. It helped me on keeping on the right side of the trade, but it still didn't help me in my risk reward.
So it's interesting, like the idea of support and resistance still stayed with you, but now that you saw the EMAs, you were like, okay, these are like moving support and resistance levels that I can still use and still have that concept. Because I think like, think about what support and resistance is. It's telling us that price has stopped at that level and stayed there for a certain period of time, which normally means that there's a lot of buying and selling going on at that price level. It's a sensitivity zone. So I feel like what you did was like you kept the same mindset, but applied it with like new techniques. And that new technique was the EMAs, which started to develop the edge for you a little bit more. Because like you said previous, you were drawing just to lines. I wanted to go back to that before. You know, I have a video where in that previous video I've made where I talk about drawing the zones using the wicks and that 2 candle rule. Comparing your experience with both, do you find that lines just at a single price level, is that a better way to draw the support or resistance, or is it better to draw a zone? What do you think?
I was always taught that obviously that doing it with the bodies are stronger than the wicks are. And we used to go by the touches, so we're looking for more bodies to touch the line, but obviously we still include the wicks within, but the wicks are weaker.
Okay.
So as long as we can get, like, I think it was over 4 bodies touching that line, that was strong, and we could use that. But what we still had to really kind of do was, even though the line was there, if there was a lot of wicks below it, say on our support line, we would still have to know we've got enough stop loss to cover the wicks as well, because we like it to obviously cover the wicks to be safer. And that was why when I was trying to do my risk to reward, I was never getting it, because resistance was everywhere. Look, you can see resistance. So if I was covering wicks and a stop loss as well, I knew my stop losses were always going to be bigger than my next resistance line was.
Right. So your risk reward was never going to be great.
So my risk reward was never right.
So taking that, again, it's just like, I feel like the mindset, because you saw something there. You saw something in this idea of like, okay, price does move to certain levels and then it stops there, and you can trade off these levels. Taking that and applying it with the new tactics of the EMAs, it gave you, like you said, a direction to stay on the right side of the trade. Because with the support and resistance levels, you could go so far back on a chart and it might look like support over the last month, but if you go back the last year, it could actually be resistance. Meaning on the bottom versus on the top, support on the bottom, resistance on top. So that's the other reason why, and I love this video concept, it's because support and resistance don't work because it's just everywhere, like you just said. And what I'm trying to get at is just that you could go back so far, and that level that might be significant there could be another one 5 pips above it if you just go back far enough.
I could never get direction. I could never really find my direction, and I knew I always wanted to be on the right side of the trade. I wanted to ride the trend. But with me using support and resistance at all times, I was never always taught to go on the overall trend.
So now, because I feel like that could make you, if you go and look at your experience, how you went from using the support and resistance with the other group to then having EMAs and a proper entry signal, you're now clarifying the edge when you're here, over the last year with ASFX.
Yeah.
You could look back on that and say, my experience with my other group makes me bitter and I don't like support and resistance. But you didn't do that. Like, you still stay open-minded with it. So now the EMAs, as you've said, have been like your bread and butter, your trustworthy support for the trend and for levels to trade off of. Are there any other significant levels that you're looking at for support and resistance?
My pivot points.
Pivot points, just standard pivot points.
Would you consider,
here's a good question for you, and this will be good for the people that watch us every day in the group chat. Do you give more weight to pivot points than you do to yesterday's high or yesterday's low?
I do give weight to, especially the daily pivot.
That solid pivot put right in the middle. Yeah.
That solid pivot. I give more weight to it because I do, and I've seen it so many times now since I've focused on that when price action opens above that daily pivot, it usually does trend above it for most of the day.
So that kind of gives you an idea for trend.
And it kind of gives me an idea for which way I'm trading today. Obviously, we do have our TDI and things that I now take into consideration, but even before ASFX, I had introduced daily pivots to give me, another. But this is when you're trying to find your own edge, and you've not got a solid system in place here. You're trying to bring in what you're finding success, what you feel confident with to trade. And for me, because I wasn't confident enough just with support and resistance, I was trying to think, what other indicators could I bring in here to help me trade?
Sense.
Because obviously this was before I found ASFX.
Right. So the pivots were something that were with you for a while. Yeah. And I feel like if you're going to use, like, again, this is another video topic, but why indicators do work, right? Because people say they lag. Pivots to me are not a lagging indicator. It's based on the math from the previous day. It's just a price level. It doesn't move. It is what it is. It just gives you it for that day or that week or that month. You know what I mean? So pivots are very reliable just because, to me, it's based on math. And if it's based on math, I like it. You know what I mean? Because that's price. There's no judging that. It is what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think you've got this really good mindset towards support and resistance and towards which levels are important and which levels aren't important. So maybe the concept that we originally had, which was that support and resistance don't work, maybe that's not the right way to say it. It's that only certain support and resistance levels work, but not for entry signals. They work to give you levels to trade off of.
Yes. Yeah. I could use them as entry signals.
How, when we're talking about this, it makes me think of how, like, on the higher time frames recently, and I know we have mentioned this for those that listen really closely, but how we were talking about, I mean, look at the last 6 to 8 months, I would say, on the higher time frames, we're not looking at the 50 EMA, the 200 EMA, or even the 800 EMA. And I think that right there, you're now even giving not less weight, but it's just like
Yeah,
too much noise. Right there, by removing EMAs on higher time frames, we're saying, look, there's too many levels everywhere. There's enough
mhm,
support everywhere. It's everywhere. Let's just keep it simple. And that's been working so much better
yeah,
for me. I don't know about you.
yeah, yeah. No, I've noticed it. I've noticed it on you. Obviously, for me, I'm trying to get to there, and
Yeah.
I'm still incorporating them. You know, the 800 sometimes has kept me out of trade if I've seen it near not giving me good risk reward on the
Yep.
4 hour or
Yep.
whatever.
There's one,
And
isn't it an EG trade recently? Maybe that it was something like that. If I can remember the
it
pair.
was a recent trade that I stayed out,
Yep.
and you got really
Yep.
good R multiple on it because you were just trusting that 8 and 21, where I was looking at all the 5 EMAs. And it's funny because obviously when I came to you initially over a year ago, I was only trading with one of the EMAs, and
Right.
then I came in and I was like trading with 5.
Right. It's interesting to see it come full circle. But now, as you experience situations like that, you adjust. You know what I mean? You don't
Yeah,
stay stuck in a certain way. I
yeah,
want to touch on one thing that's also important about support and resistance. A lot of people will get out of trades quickly, right? We talk about the disposition effect, which means you're way likely to get out of your winners too
yeah.
quick and hold your losers too long.
Losers.
So very often people will be like, oh, I bought it. It's, let's just say 20 pips under the high from yesterday. We get to that price level and you get out of the trade completely. So what I've done over time is I felt like I've kind of used that as an idea where maybe I want
Yeah,
to
yeah,
close some of the trade, maybe take
yeah.
some profit off, but to close at a support or resistance level like that, to me, doesn't really make
No,
sense because you could be breaking that and going to the next level right
yeah,
above that. You just
yeah,
didn't see it because you didn't zoom out far enough. You
yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
So
I
when you,
totally agree with that. I think that if you want to use it, as I have said to many, if they've said to me, okay, well, I'm trading it up to the high of day again, I'll say, well, just make sure that you are putting that in when you're doing your risk reward to say that, okay, I've got enough here, 1 hour, whatever it is, to lock your stop, but don't close the trade, because that is the problem I had. You never know which support and resistance is going to hold and
exactly.
which one price action is going to go through.
Exactly. So it's much more instead of the mindset there, just to stay on this topic of like how to manage the trade,
Yeah,
instead of the mindset of like, oh, I was right a little bit, let me take the full trade off just because I'm at a support level. It's better to say, let's not take the full trade off,
yeah,
mitigate risk, take some profit, move a
mm-hmm,
stop loss because you
yeah.
don't know what the next 3 candles are going to do. And by taking the full trade off, you're almost making an assumption that you do. You know what I'm saying?
That's what I kind of see a lot of traders do, is they're using the support and resistance as kind of, well, as price is going to come up here because it's came away from that level before, so it's going to do it again. But how do
Exactly.
we ever know? How do we know price action is going to do it that time and not
Look
just
at
go through it?
I'll make sure I link this too. With this video that we're filming right here is going to go up after a EuroCAD recap that I took right before the end of the year. I'll make sure I'll link it above so you guys can go watch it. In that trade recap, I show how I was in the trade. It moves up to the high of day. There was some
Yeah,
divergence there. It pinned it. I was up like 1.2 or 1.3 R. It comes
yeah,
back down and I go negative, and I didn't take any profit there. So the next time it came back up to that divergence line to the high day, I did take some profit because I wasn't going to get pinned on it
yeah,
twice,
yeah,
right? And what happened? It took off and went way higher. You know what I'm saying? Of course it
yeah.
did, because that's trend trading. But the point being, like you said, you don't know which support and resistance level it's going to stop and not at.
No,
So you
and
have to,
I was even taught, yes, I was taught candle formation. So, an engulfing candle could come off the
sure,
resistance and I could
sure.
sell it back down. But for me, I was still never just confident enough, for me personally, to trade support and resistance with a candle formation.
Me neither.
I wasn't. And I think that just comes to personal style. Like we say,
Yeah.
everyone's got their own personal style. But for me, I knew I was never going to be a success by trading resistance with candle formations because I was never confident in them enough.
So when you have these coaching calls, because I know you've been very busy lately, even into the holidays, with
Yeah.
the people that are coming through ASFX, how do you break the mindset that a lot of them have, which is that support and resistance are super important? Is there any tips that you would give to somebody that right now is
I think it
trading?
depends on the individual, because a lot of the ones I've now had, my coaching clients, are not just relying on support and resistance. They'll ask me how I use it, and for me now, when I'm looking at my trades, and maybe it is for aimed at an ASFX, you'll know the D1, for example, and I'm taking it long. And as we'll call it, or you'll say, you know, that can be in no man's land. It's maybe in between the 50 and the 200 or whatever. I would then go to my higher time frames to say, okay, can I find some support and resistance in there that I could use at this no man's land in our system to see if I could trade something off it.
Makes sense. And
that's really the only time now I'm using support and resistance.
As a level.
Even it's just as a level that
to trade
price
off
actions, that's it.
Yeah. So it's really just support and resistance is a tool. It's not your entry signal. It's not your trigger signal. It's not even your stop loss or take profit. It's just a tool to tell you where you're at if you should be looking to trade off this level.
Yeah.
If you watch this far in the video, that's the key right there. That's basically what we're saying. Because we filmed this, this idea comes from a lot of people thinking support and resistance is a trading edge. I get that all the time. I put up things on Instagram and I say on the box, what is your edge? Do you know how many people say support and resistance? It's crazy. But now after this conversation, hopefully you guys can see it's not where you can have your edge. It's a tool to get you to the point of then finding your stop loss, finding your trigger signal, finding your potential take profit. It's a piece. It's a piece of this. It's not the end all be all. And this is why I'm really glad that we got this done, Lindsay.
People can realize that exactly support and resistance, you know, isn't an edge and it's just another level that we trade off of, then that'll help them to push on, like me, to try and find, okay, what other indicators can I bring in
100%
to help me find my edge in the market.
Yep 100%. You're spot on. So once you get past this idea of, okay, this isn't my edge, it's my tool, then you get deeper and you can get to that edge. So if you're watching this and you've sat this far through, we appreciate you. We're going to wrap it up here, but I want you guys to really think about this. If what you're doing isn't consistent, then what you're doing needs more rules. That's simple. So now let's question your support and resistance use in particular, and maybe transition from saying, oh, this is my stop loss because this looks like it's a support level, transition to saying, no, let's find a level to trade off of in the direction of a trend, and then go in and find a detailed pattern that we can trade at that level to follow this trend. So it's one step. We're getting you guys down the funnel to finding your edge. But I think this is good, Lindsay. I want to know from everybody watching, comment below if you can relate to Lindsay's progression through support and resistance, right? Or comment below if you have any questions about this, and we can always come back and revisit this topic as much as you guys need, because I want to make sure you get past the initial level that really does kill. I mean, if you think 90% of traders lose their money, maybe 50% of them are burning out because they're just trying to find support and resistance levels, and it's a joke because they're everywhere. You know what I mean?
They're everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah, I totally agree. I really hope they can relate to me and try and find their edge moving forward, and just, you know, using support and resistance as a foundation like I did.
Yeah, I think they definitely will be able to. So for everybody listening, we appreciate you. Lindsay, I always appreciate you sharing your time and sharing your story and your input with us. For everybody watching, make sure you subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. Drop a comment. Let us know what you think. Thumbs up if you enjoyed it. And we'll keep bringing you the value. We'll see you guys in the next video.
Yeah, thank you.